Lawyers of Reddit. What are some myths people actually believe about the law that drive you crazy? If someone has debt and dies, their family does not have to pay it off. But some banks will try to get them to anyway in case they think they need to. As Reddit has helped show lately, when a debt is owed in the United States, the debtor can pay the debtee with any valid currency, and the debtee must accept it. However, this only applies when a debt is owed. The guy at McDonald's does not have to break your $100 bill for a $2 cheeseburger, and the guy at the liquor store doesn't have to take your Ziploc bag is full of pennies for your Four Loko. When a good or service is being sold, it's up to the discretion of the seller whether or not they accept any given currency. Contrary to popular belief, a husband and wife can be charged for the same crime. That you can weasel out of a contract or break the law by trying to be clever with language and finding loopholes. Courts will apply the test of reasonableness. Would a reasonable person interpret the contract/regulation the way you are trying to? I'm not a lawyer, but I'm in the medical profession. Please note that I'm generalizing. People erroneously think that every undesired medical outcome is a slam dunk lawsuit winner. That is not the case. In order to win a malpractice lawsuit, you typically have to prove either that the medical decision/intervention/care were different than what a reasonable provider would have done in a similar situation, or you have to prove actual malice. Almost impossible to prove. You also have to prove that actual harm was done. If a child comes in with a 2 days history of a runny nose and fever, guess what? That child has a cold. Fever medication, fluids and rest are what the doctor is going to prescribe. If it turns out the child has some weird 1 in 100,000 cancer and dies from it, it is going to be almost impossible to win anything more than a go away and quit wasting our time settlement, because any other reasonable provider would have arrived at the same diagnosis. TLDR, life is not fair and happens. Valor Morgulis. That the First Amendment applies to entities other than government. It does not. You don't have free speech rights on Facebook or in a football stadium. This is kind of a specific one, but being the victim of a crime doesn't exempt you from punishment for subsequent crimes. I had to defend an admitted child molester, and I must have spent a good month explaining to him on multiple occasions why I was molested in church as a kid, and that's why I touched those little boys was not a good defense strategy. Signs put up in stores or waiver signs stating that you agree not to hold a person or business responsible for harm done to you on their premises or by them are not legally binding. If you're driving behind a dump truck and it says not responsible for broken windshields from falling gravel, that's bull. They're responsible because they're hauling gravel on a public thoroughfare where other people are. They're responsible for all damage their vehicle and their load does. They just put those signs up to deter lawsuits. You can't waive liability for possible harms that might happen in the future. At least, you can't in Missouri. I tried. So, stores that have signs that say not responsible for injury or accident done while on the premises is bull. Even if the document looks official and you signed it, you can't sign away your right to sue for future harms. Not a lawyer, but people seriously have no idea what entrapment is. Pro tip, if you're buying/selling drugs to someone and you ask if they're a cop, it's not entrapment if they lie and say no. That a person can shoot a Welshman with a longbow after sundown if they are on the other side of the English/Welsh border. This possibly originated as a reasonable response when we were at war and a proactive militia was needed. Maybe the law was never technically repealed, but some pre-17th century law doesn't supersede the fact that it would still be murder/wounding/GBH. Also, I'll throw this out there. I don't know why businesses put up signs that say we have the right to refuse service to anyone. I've had shop owners tell me that they were told that the rule only applies if they have the sign up. I think this is a ploy by the sign makers to keep themselves in business. Any business has the right to refuse anyone, and they don't have to give a reason. Just be careful if you do give a reason, as that can lead to trouble. My advice would be to simply tell the person, I'm not comfortable serving you today. Please leave. If they argue with that, don't tell them anything else besides that you're calling the police and you'd like them to leave. Call the cops if they don't leave. Once you've clearly asked them to leave your business, if they don't immediately make an effort to evacuate, it's trespassing, which is enough to get a ticket, if not arrested, most places. By owning land you are then free to do whatever you want on it. It seems people think, because they own a 1/4 acre lot they can set up their own country, and are free to beat, kidnap, or kill anyone who accidentally steps onto their borders. Not really a misconception about the law per se, but my head wants to explode with rage when I hear, oh, law school? I'd be great at law school, and being a lawyer, because I'm so good at arguing with my mom. In reality, being a lawyer is more akin to a research librarian than it is arguing with people. That they get paid to lie, zealously representing your client's position, and lying are not the same. Sure, some do, and some get away with it, and maybe clients would prefer it, if that was what they were actually paying for. But there are professional duties to uphold, and sanctions in light of their abuse. Basically I'm tired of my relatives saying, so you're one of those dirty crooks now, since I've graduated from law school, and taken the bar. Barrister here. That I can lie for you in court. No, sorry, can't mislead the court knowingly or recklessly. If you tell me you're guilty I can't say that you aren't. That criminal advocates are paid a lot of money on legal aid. If you consider £50 for a standard hearing and £80 for a trial a lot of money, then yes, they're loaded. The police will let you go, not charge you, or realize they made a mistake, if you give a really good account of yourself in interview. They won't. That I can get you off on a technicality. Ha ha ha, but no. Cases end in acquittals for lots of reasons, but never because of a technicality. Lawyers generally aren't that stupid. Legal advisors, judges etc. are never that stupid. Contracts are not necessarily binding to the letter. If somebody writes, your firstborn legally belongs to me in the appendix that nobody reads, he can't actually have your firstborn. Even if you signed that contract, simply because you cannot be expected to actually sign that. Cop here, I hardly ever have to Mirandize you. In fact, out of the way I interact with you is specifically positioned so that it isn't custodial in nature. I can show up on scene of a murder, you can be covered in blood, and as long as I don't use any force to control you, or tell you that you can't leave, I can ask you whatever I want, then arrest you, based on a full confession, and still not have to Mirandize you, as long as I don't ask any more questions. Just the idea that the legal system is some labyrinthine scheme with all communication being convoluted Latin phrases and arguments are won by producing an obscure piece of case law at the last minute. Basically in most Western legal systems it's common sense 95% of the time, and the other 5% is generally where the law is playing catch up. That lawyers are magic and can get a person out of any situation they find themselves in by being clever, no matter how wrong or stupid the person was to begin with. Sorry folks, if you thoroughly ked something up, there are limits to what we can do to fix the mess you've created. I didn't get a magic kit, crystal ball and mind-reading device upon graduation. Not a lawyer but corporate personhood. Companies were always set up as person-like entities. It's kind of the point actually. It's how they can be. Partying contract. Not that I agree with how that's been defined recently, but people complaining about corporate personhood in general are kinda giving away they have no idea business works at the fundamental level. I'm not a legal magician. When you commit a crime in broad daylight with 65 witnesses, on camera, while saying your name and social security number to ID you, I cannot somehow make it go away. And then, once you go to court, and it goes, like I'm telling you it will, it is somehow my fault. Not a lawyer, but many people I have spoken to do not understand what corporate personhood actually is. Misinterpretations of Scottish rulings, for example Hobby Lobby and Citizens United, bother me immeasurably. When these rulings are handed down, my FB feed is flooded with stupid complaints/arguments echoed from the poster's progressive blog of choice, and I get in trouble sometimes for calling people out on it. For example, currently many of my friends believe that the court created the birth control exemption for religious employers. They didn't do that. The Department of Health and Human Services did. What the court actually ruled in that case was that the DHHS had already demonstrated a less restrictive means of providing BC, which the court assumed was a compelling government interest under the RFRA. The DHHS tried to argue that for-profit corporations couldn't exercise religion because they can't pray, go to church, etc., but that's very much beside the point. A corporation can't drive a car or speak either. That doesn't mean they aren't allowed to say, use delivery vehicles or advertise. Now here's the part one have not seen a single person mention whatsoever. Under the DHHS exemption rules, insurers drop those drugs from the plan, but are also obligated to provide plan participants with separate payments for birth control services, without cost sharing with the employer. So no, it's really not as simple as my employer can withhold my birth control, and no, they can't refuse to cover blood transfusions or dodge taxes for religious reasons, both of which are mentioned specifically in the ruling itself. Similarly, people seem to think that CU created or changed the parameters of corporate personhood. What CU actually said was that restricting spending is tantamount to restricting speech, which is obviously true. If you spend 10 seconds to think about how to advertise a platform/candidate to millions of voters. In the wake of CU, I've heard many people here and elsewhere argue for abolishing corporate personhood altogether, which is asinine. Corporate personhood is simply a legal fiction that, among other things, enables groups of people to be represented in court as a single entity. Without it, you couldn't sue, say, Exxon or the state of Ohio without calling each shareholder/executive/official to court. Abolishing it because you disagree with CU is definitively myopic. TLDR, corporate personhood and people who get their news on court rulings from second-hand interpretations. Read the rulings your damn self. Almost everything that discusses them in print leaves out important details. While attending university, I lived in a dormitory. At the time, about 14 years ago, there was a major anti-piracy crackdown which targeted dormitories, since movie, music, and software piracy was rampant. A lawyer was attainted to hold an information meeting to tell about our rights and legal standings were in case we were targeted by the crackdown. The anti-piracy organizations were known for trying to make their own raids and searches of suspected pirates without a proper court order, or with police officers present. Basically, they would turn up at some address and demand that you turn over a bunch of stuff or they would sue you for millions. One could easily just ask them to go away. One student confidently said to the lawyer, but if the evidence is obtained illegally, then it can't be used, right? The lawyer answered, you have watched too many American crime shows. Evidence is evidence. TLDR, this is not Murica. Evidence is evidence, no matter how it is obtained. I'm not a lawyer, but you can't drive without shoes on. I rarely drive with shoes on. Hell, I rarely wear shoes. This one gets me every time I leave a friend's house and carry my shoes out with me and they say, you have to put shoes on. It's illegal. Then, like I always do, I respond, no, I don't. I have told you this before. The only thing I have to put on is my seatbelt. Then I take off my pants, shut the door, and drive home. That the First Amendment allows you to say whatever the hell you want without any repercussions from anyone. The Constitution only protects you from government action, with a small exception for racial discrimination. So the government can't take away benefits or prosecute you for your speech. But your private employer can certainly fire for anything you say or do, or for no reason at all. Assuming you are an at-will employee, they wake up and decide they don't like the way your face looks, fired. They don't like your opinion on abortion, fired. That's totally legal. The media can bash you for what you say, and some people cry out what happened to free speech. But the media is not a branch of the government. Edit, the United States Constitution for clarification.